All right. Who's ready to get started? It's 1:02 or 10:02, depending on what part of if you're on the East Coast or the West Coast or somewhere in between. Let's go ahead and dive in. Welcome to the podcast guesting masterclass. I am so excited to be here with you this week, celebrating our 5th year anniversary of the podcast guesting masterclass. I'm Jessica Rhodes. I am the founder and co-owner of Interview Connections, here to teach you live this week on Zoom how to stop being the best kept secret in your industry and amplify your authority online with podcast guesting. So just give me a yes in the chat if you are done being the best kept secret. Like maybe that's how you felt last year, but not this year. This time next year, you will not be saying I'm the best kept secret. So give me a yes if you're ready to stop being the best kept secret and finally be seen and heard by your target market with podcast guesting. Let's go. You are going to have access to the replays of this masterclass until Tuesday, January 21st at midnight. So a week from tomorrow, if you're here with me live on Monday, you've got access for 8 total days. So the masterclass officially ends Tuesday, the 21st at midnight. And I have added a workbook. So you guys, yesterday, like I said, Saturday's my birthday coming up. It's our 5th year anniversary. And yesterday, Sunday, I was kind of contemplating, like, how can I make this the best masterclass ever? Because I don't just want to go through the motions. I really want all of you here to have the best experience possible. And I kind of got an intuitive hit. I've been listening to feedback, and some people say I kind of would like a visual aid. And so what I did is I made a workbook for you. So let me know in the chat, like, are you somebody that is visual? Do you tend to learn better when you're able to be like writing notes and getting kind of some of the main takeaways organized? Now I have made you a workbook, and I'm so excited about this workbook. Douglas is going to put a link in the chat. I did email it, but if you have opted out of emails, you may not have seen it. So Douglas is going to put a link in the chat. We'll put a link to it below just in case you didn't get it. I recommend printing it out so you can be taking notes. So that way, after this masterclass wraps up, after Tuesday, you have your takeaways. And it's not just a distant memory that fades in time, but you have your blueprint for podcast guesting. So print this out. If you don't have it printed out or you don't have a printer, just pull it up on your computer as a guide, and then you can take notes, pen to paper. Okay, so this workbook is going to be key. I will cue you in when there's a time to write it down. I'll say, write this down in your workbook. So it'll keep you engaged. It'll keep you learning and building on each step. So each of the sessions in this masterclass builds on the next. And so there's going to be a session today. There's going to be a session tomorrow, Wednesday, and Thursday, and each session builds. So stay engaged. Okay. We'll be doing the first microphone draw at the end of the session, and you do need to be here live to win. So you're here. Make sure your Zoom name says your name, because Douglas from Team Interview Connections is adding all of your names into our little name picker. And if we don't have your name, you can't win because we don't know who you are. So make sure that your Zoom name is your actual name so we can effectively enter you into the draw, and then we'll pick the winner at the end of the session. So again, my name is Jessica Rhodes. In 2013, I founded Interview Connections, which was the world's first ever podcast interview booking agency. Shortly before starting what has now become an entire industry, I was working for an environmental nonprofit. I was in a totally different industry. I was leading a door-to-door field canvas. And when I found out that I would become a mom, I was pregnant with my first child, I decided I wanted to be a stay-at-home mom. And I called up my parents and I asked for their advice, because my dad had been running an online business since I was a teenager. He started an online business in the early 2000s. And so I asked for his advice, and he told me about being a virtual assistant. Now, who here has virtual assistants, or you know what they are? Maybe you have worked with one before. He told me about being a virtual assistant and how you're really your own business. You have your own business, you have clients, and you could provide any type of service to business owners and entrepreneurs. And he even told me, I'll be your first client. So my dad was my first client. His name is Jim Palmer. He actually just retired this past year. And for many, many years, he was a business coach. He had a newsletter marketing company. And he asked me to book him on podcasts. So 11 years ago, I started booking my dad as a guest on podcasts, because for him, he had been going to trade shows and conferences and seminars. Like, who here has grown their business through in-person events? You've gone to conferences, you've gone to trade shows, you go to networking opportunities. Like, you are out hustling, meeting people face to face, having those conversations. Like, who here does a lot of in-person stuff or has, and that's how you've built your business? Now, my dad was doing that, and he started doing podcasts as a way to have the same type of in-person conversation, but on a podcast. And so he asked me to book him on shows. And we did this because it was so effective, and he didn't have to go book a hotel. He didn't have to get on an airplane. He didn't have to do all the work that goes along with in-person events. And so it was incredibly effective. I took on more clients. And then in the fall of 2013, I launched interviewconnections.com. And within the first couple of years, grew the business to six figures, multiple six figures, and just trailblazed this whole industry of podcast guesting. So to this day, 11 years later, my baby at the time, he's 11 years old now. He'll be 12 in March. We have booked as a company over 30,000 podcast interviews. We've worked with more than 800 clients. We have had tens upon thousands of entrepreneurs come through this masterclass to learn how to leverage podcast guesting in their business. So I'm not teaching you this week anything from theory or hypothetical ideas or things I've learned from other people. Like, you are learning from me what we have seen work through our actual implementation of this strategy. Both myself, I get interviewed on podcasts multiple times every single month. We book hundreds of interviews a month. So I am excited that you're here to learn how to do it correctly. So I'm also curious of those here. We have, like, as you can see, there's over 200 people, 222, woo, angel number. We have 222 people here on session one live right now. Who here knows that podcast guesting is a strategy you're going to implement in 2025? Some people come here because they just heard of it and they want to know if it's the right fit for them. And some of you are here, you're like, I'm doing it. I'm going to do it. I know that this is how I'm going to grow my business. Okay. Yes. Like, you just know that when you're interviewed on podcasts, people want to work with you. Amazing. Cool. So this masterclass is perfect for you because we are going to teach you the strategies for actually monetizing your visibility. So you may know that this is the right fit for you. And I want to make sure that this time next year, you look back and say, my interviews actually generated an ROI. I got leads, I got clients, I grew my referral partnerships, I amplified my brand awareness. Like, this is about helping those who know that this is a fit to actually do it effectively. And maybe you're sitting here, you're like, maybe it's for me. I'm not really sure. That's why I'm here. That's okay. I'm going to show you why this works and allow you to know whether or not this is the right fit for you and your business. So for those of you who know without a shadow of a doubt that podcast guesting is in your 2025 marketing plan, the one thing that you need to do is actually get booked. And so we are a done for you agency, Interview Connections. We specialize in serving successful entrepreneurs who understand the value of staying in their zone of genius and who desire a high touch concierge level service that actually gets results and gets you on podcasts. So if that is you and you're like, I know I'm going to do this and I know I need help getting booked, then book a consultation call with myself or Douglas here from Team Interview Connections. We'll talk with you about what it would look like to work with our company to get you booked on podcasts this year. And as a valued attendee of this masterclass, we are offering $1,000 off our services when you enroll by Tuesday, the 21st at midnight. So we're going to put a link in the chat of Zoom to book a consultation call, and we'll also have it below. So if you're here watching the replay, just look below. We're going to have the link to book a call in the chat. Okay, workbook. So if you are a visual learner, type yes in the chat. I have provided a workbook. With this being the 5th year anniversary of the Podcast Guesting Masterclass and it being my birthday week, I wanted to make sure that this experience is the best free event you've ever taken online. Like, I want you to walk away being like, I can't believe I didn't pay for that. It was so valuable. So I want you to download this workbook. Douglas is working. Give Douglas a round of applause. He's doing a million things for me behind the scenes. So we're going to get a link to this workbook in the chat. I have emailed it to you. So check your email. If you opted out of emails, you might not get it. You might not have it, but we're going to put a link in the chat and you're going to take notes in the workbook to really help you cement what you're learning in this masterclass. Quick overview of the sessions, and then we're going to be diving in. So today is session 1. I'm going to talk to you about laying a strong foundation. Crystal is dropping the link. Thank you, Crystal. I think it's Crystal, Kate Crystal Griffith. Amazing. This is a community here. I love it. So how to lay a strong foundation for your podcast guesting strategy. There is a big demand in podcast guesting. Now, some people who are learning about podcast guesting recently are like, is it a fad? Is this new? Is this like good now, but may not be good next year? I have been booking people on podcasts for 11 years. I can tell you every single year I've been in business since 2013, the popularity of podcasting has gone up. The number of people who want to be on podcasts has gone up. The number of podcasts that are getting started has gone up. It's not going anywhere. So let's go. We're going to make sure that you implement this strategy correctly and that you see an ROI. Tomorrow, session 2 is how to monetize your podcast appearances. So if your goal is to generate more leads and sales in your business from podcast guesting, type sales in the chat and come to session 2, because session 2 is all about how to effectively convert people from the audience onto your email list, onto a sales call, wanting to work with you. Because being a guest is fun, but as an entrepreneur who's making a marketing investment, if it's not producing a return on investment, it's arguably not working well. So we want to make sure that the strategies you're implementing are actually leading to leads and sales. So that is what I'm going to be talking about in session 2. I'm going to teach you strategies, for example, that helped our client, Christina Woods. She's an empowerment coach and a clinical hypnotherapist. She has had many podcast hosts become her clients. She's had many listeners become her clients. She's had an enormous increase in her email list. So all the strategies that work for her, I'm going to tell you about in session 2. We are going to have another mic draw. So there's going to be an opportunity for you to win a microphone in each of the live sessions this week. Wednesday, session 3 is podcast guesting success stories. So we'll have a panel of some of our most successful clients at Interview Connections come and actually share what the podcast guesting strategy looks like in their unique businesses. Now, I'm very excited because another thing that I've done for you this week as our 5th anniversary masterclass and my birthday week is I've added a 4th session, because when you ask for things, I listen and I deliver. And I've had people ask, like, I want more tips, I want more value. And so I added a 4th session for you this week. Again, this is like I added it yesterday. So if you're like, wait a second, I thought it was Monday through Wednesday, we'll add it onto your calendar. Thursday at 1 p.m., there's going to be a bonus session where I'm going to give you 10 tips on how to use AI to repurpose your podcast appearances and amplify your authority and your visibility online. So I'm going to give you a ton of actionable tips on Thursday. So all of you who said, like, yes, this is a part of my strategy this year, then come to all the sessions, but definitely come on Thursday, because I'll be teaching you ways that you can take your podcast interviews, turn them into social media content, use them in your marketing funnel, use them to convert more sales. Thursday at 1 p.m., I've added it to the ad event. So if you've added the ad event to your calendar, you'll see it pop up, and it'll be the same Zoom link as today. So you could just add that onto your calendar for Thursday at 1 p.m., same time. Okay. All right. So all the sessions are going to get recorded, and I'll email them, text them out as soon as they are live. So let's go. Let me know type yes in the chat if you've got your workbook printed out. Who was able to print that bad boy out and is ready to take some notes? Okay, amazing. You know, it's always a miracle when a printer works. So I think we all need to celebrate that. If you've printed today successfully, you've had a good day already. So let's go. All right. So the first step to laying a strong foundation is to have clear goals for why you are doing this. We have clients achieving all kinds of results with podcast guesting. So I'm going to give you some examples of goals. Number 1, increase brand awareness. The more people who are aware of your company, who are aware of you and what you do, that is going to increase the number of people who ultimately want to work with you. Because if you're working with a really, really small pond of potential clients, it's going to be harder to grow. So increase brand awareness is a perfect goal for podcast guesting, because that is guaranteed what's going to happen is you're going to get more brand awareness. Number 2 goal that you can have is to generate more warm, qualified leads. Does anyone here do cold outreach? Or you're marketing on social media where people don't really know you that well, but maybe they see like a 30-second reel or a TikTok, or they see a post on LinkedIn, but they don't know you that well. Okay. So if you are generating leads, but they're pretty cold, they don't trust you a lot yet, then that is a perfect goal for podcast guesting, because the more people hear you on podcasts and they hear your story, the more they will trust you. And people that trust you are going to be warmer and more qualified. Number 3 goal is to close high ticket clients. So this masterclass is for entrepreneurs and business owners. I know many of you are coaches, consultants, you have a service. That is high ticket, right? You're not selling something for $20. You're selling something for maybe 100,000. Who here has a high ticket offering, a high ticket service where you're closing big contracts with your clients? Okay. So your goal could be to close high ticket sales. You're not looking for hundreds of people to become your client. You're looking for maybe 5 people to sign a pretty large contract with you, and that would make this amazing. You could have both low and high. Maybe you have an ascension where people come in at $47 and then they work their way up to a $30,000, program. You could have a goal to really increase your following online. Maybe you know that when people follow you on LinkedIn and they read your post, they become your client. You need more people to follow you on LinkedIn. So your goal could be to get more people connecting with you and following you on LinkedIn. So let me know in the chat, what is your goal for podcast guesting? Let me know in the chat and write it down in your workbook. So right here in your workbook, you're going to write, what are your top 3 goals for podcast guesting? This is so important because, again, after a year of podcast guesting, I want you to look back at this workbook and say, I nailed it. I met my goal. I met my goal of more brand awareness. I closed high ticket clients from podcast guesting, right? Write down what your goals are in that first part of the workbook and also put it in the chat. Let us all know here. So your goal is the first thing that you need clarity on to know what types of shows would be a good fit for you. So this is the big question, right? Like, how do I know what podcast would be a good fit for me? Like, if you're thinking about working with Interview Connections, you might be asking, what types of shows are you guys going to book me on? And the first thing we have to know is what are your goals, because that's going to inform who is your target audience. So as you're thinking about your goals, I want to tell you about Mark Ritter. He is the CEO of Member Business Financial Services and New Direction Lending. He's been working with Interview Connections since 2018, I believe, maybe 2017. And when he started working with us, his goal for podcast guesting was to use podcast appearances in lieu of live speaking engagements. So he was like my dad, right? He was doing a lot of live speaking engagements to generate awareness for their commercial lending offers. And he wanted to use podcast guesting as a way to replace that type of work, to be more scalable in his speaking. And so by focusing on visibility to audiences that are a good fit for his offering, he was able to attribute over $40 million in commercial loans closed from podcast guesting. So what we did was we looked at what are his goals, right? What are the results that he wants to achieve? Who is the target audience? He does commercial loans. So we looked at business owners and real estate investors. Those are the 2 types of audiences that are going to be an ideal client for him. And then he went out and consistently got interviewed on podcasts that speak to those audiences. And he looks back, his case study, over $40 million in loans brokered from podcast guesting. When an interview goes live, people are picking up the phone, calling his office saying, I need a loan for my business. I need a loan for a real estate project. So now, what types of shows do you need to be interviewed on to reach your goal? Again, that depends on who your target audience is. So if you want more clients, then your target audience is going to be whoever your ideal client is. So write that down next. That's step 2 on your workbook. Write down who is your ideal client. Who is that target audience that needs to be hearing you as a guest on podcasts? So let us know in the chat, who is your target audience? What are your goals? That is going to inform what are the types of podcasts that are going to be a good fit for you. So while you're thinking about that and writing down on your workbook, I'm going to tell you about Joe Sullivan. He leads a marketing consultancy and agency that targets the manufacturing industry. So if you have a very specific niche and you're like, do you guys work with different niches? We very successfully helped Joe Sullivan close a 6-figure contract through podcast guesting on manufacturing shows. So absolutely we do. So Joe's goal with podcast guesting was to continue building thought leadership and add credibility to his company. He wanted to humanize his brand and generate leads and referrals to his agency. And one of the listeners who heard him as a guest closed a 6-figure contract with him, signed a 6-figure contract. So podcast guesting really works when you have clarity on your goals, you know your target audience, and then you commit to being a guest consistently on podcasts speaking to your market. Okay? So now, once you've identified your goals and your target audience, the key to success with podcast guesting is speaking on the right podcast for you consistently. Now, a big myth is to think if I could just get placed on like 3 to 4 shows a year that have a huge audience, I'll have success. And that is not the truth. That is not correct. That is a huge myth. And it's this misconception that comes from this thought that it could be easy. Like if I could just find that silver bullet, that one big show. But it's actually about consistent visibility on targeted shows in your reach. So here is what you need to know about podcast data. There is a third page of the workbook that is just for notes. So for things that I haven't prompted you, here's where you want to write stuff down. So these are going to be a couple things you might want to write down to remember. Podcast listener data isn't public. Write that down. Podcast listener data is not public. Download numbers. How many people listen to this podcast? How many people download this podcast? It's not public. Only the host of the show knows that information. So as a booking agency, we'll research and identify select podcasts to pitch our clients to that are about, who's the host of the show? Who is their targeted audience? Who are they trying to reach? What are the episode topics about? What is their social media following and online presence looks like? What are their rankings and reviews and YouTube subscribers? So we'll look at all the public information available to us to best identify the shows that look like the best possible fit. Ratings and reviews are a very limited scope to how good of a fit a show is for you. So some people will think, well, I don't know the downloads, but I could look at how many ratings and reviews they have on Apple Podcasts. So this is really important. This is data that you might want to write down to remember. Of all the millions and millions of people that are listening to podcasts, about 30% of people are using Spotify to listen to podcasts. Another 30% are using Apple Podcasts to listen to podcasts. And the rest are on a variety of other players. They might even be listening through YouTube or through the host's website. Let me know in the chat, how do you listen to podcasts? I'm personally a Spotify girl. After being an Apple Podcast girl for many, many years, I use Spotify because I listen to all my music there. So it's all in one place. So you can see just from this chat, we've got Spotify, we've got Apple, we've got YouTube, Apple, Spotify. So if you're only judging a show based off of how many reviews they have on Apple Podcasts, you're not accounting for all of the other people who are listening through other platforms. Like I'm not going to leave a review on Apple Podcasts. I don't use that app. So that is what you need to understand about podcast data is that there's no one factor, there's no one KPI that's going to say this show is a good fit or this show isn't a good fit. You need to look at the whole picture. And targeted shows that align with your target audience and align with your goals are what's going to bring you the results that you need. So for example, our client, Jonathan Porter Wisman, he's a serial entrepreneur, SaaS founder. When he was a guest on a podcast, one of the listeners heard it and actually was a former client of Jonathan's. He hadn't talked to Jonathan in years, reconnected after hearing him on this podcast, and ended up investing 6 figures into one of his companies. So one listener hearing you on the correct show can make all the difference. Okay, so being a guest consistently on targeted podcasts. And if you're hearing me talk about like how to select shows, it does take a lot of work. This is why we offer this as a done-for-you service. We have 12 full-time local employees, so we don't outsource our booking work to virtual assistants and contractors. All of our team members are local full-time. They've worked here for many of them over 5 years. And we will do all the work to research and identify, vet, and qualify the podcast for you. So if you know that podcast guesting is something you're going to be doing and you're like, what would it look like to maybe not have to do all the work myself to get booked? Book a consultation call. We'll put the link in the chat or below the video to book a time to see if our service is the right fit for you. All right. So the next step to laying a strong foundation for your podcast guesting strategy is to have a mindset and a commitment to be all in and to be of service to the host and their audience. And most importantly, please write this down, believe it will work for you. You have to believe it will work for you. You could ask me, Jess, is this going to work for me? I think this will work for everyone, but only if you believe it will work for you. Your belief in whether or not this is going to work for you is the most important thing because you can put every tactic in place correctly, but if you don't believe it's going to work, it won't. So when you have an energy of abundance and you believe that when you speak to your target audience, people will want to work with you, then you will attract dream clients from podcast guesting. It's just that simple. Simple, not always easy, but it is that simple. Be all in. What does this mean? Podcast guesting is a long-term strategy. So if anyone is here as a podcast host, let us know in the chat if you saw an ROI on your podcast in the first month. I'm going to guess we get a lot of crickets right now because podcasting is a long-term strategy. All right. It is not something that produces overnight results. nor will being a guest on podcasts produce overnight results. However, when you commit to podcast guesting long-term, the results will blow your freaking mind. I have grown Interview Connections to a multiple seven-figure company, and podcast guesting has been at the centerpiece of this strategy. Me going out there and sharing my story and connecting and having those conversations has been paramount to taking Interview Connections from nothing and an industry that didn't even exist to the leader of the industry and working with, hundreds and hundreds of entrepreneurs and thousands of entrepreneurs in the space. So you do need to have that mindset and commitment. Like our program, for example, the minimum engagement is 30 guaranteed bookings. We work with you for a year. So, book a call to learn what it would look like to actually use our Amplified Authority program, because we have crafted it to make sure that you are committed and that you're in it for the long haul and that you are going to see results. Now, there is a pitfall I want to make sure you avoid when it comes to your mindset. If you are, for example, judging the host and their show and you're constantly questioning, is this working for me? That is going to be your reality. So in your workbook, I did write a prompt for you. You might want to contemplate this and ponder it a little bit after this session. But if you know what it might be for you, I want you to write down the one mindset shift that you could make. You don't have to make it, but you could, because if you made a mindset shift here, you'll see more success with podcast guesting. So some examples of mindset shifts I have personally witnessed people could make to see more success is shifting your mindset to bigger shows are better to maybe the right shows are best for me. Maybe you need to shift your mindset to results should be instant. I should be generating an ROI from every single show. There should be people lining up to work with me. To visibility and brand awareness takes time. And I know if I focus on excellence and I focus on taking full responsibility for my results and committing to being a great guest over time, I'm going to see my business grow. Maybe you need to shift for what's in it for me? What can I get from this appearance versus what can I give to this host? So think about what is a mindset that you have about podcast guesting right now that through this conversation, maybe you could shift it to see more results in your business and to see more success. So write that down in your workbook and think about it. So once you have really mastered your mindset and you have that spirit of abundance, you are here and you are in it to provide service, and you fully believe that when you provide service and you share and you speak to the right audience and you are effective with the strategy, that you will generate leads and sales in your business, then we want to get back to some tactics. And so we're going to talk now about a tool that is going to help land you on the best podcasting in your niche. It is a tool that I invented in 2013 when I started Interview Connections and I started booking my dad as a guest on podcasts. And it's something called, does anyone want to guess what it is? What did I invent in 2013? The podcast one sheet. So the podcast one sheet is your key to standing out to podcast hosts in 2025. When there are thousands of guests out there pitching podcast hosts and wanting to get a spot on their show, think about a weekly podcast that's 52 spots. If they're doing a weekly podcast, they've got 52 spots, and they've got a lot more than 52 people who want one of those spots. Your podcast one sheet is the key to you standing out to these podcast hosts. Now, we make this for our clients. So if you do enroll in the Amplified Authority program, we will do this all for you. So you can put your pen and pencil down and just say, I'm going to have this done for me. But I'm going to walk you through what is on the podcast one sheet. So number one, your bio. So your bio on the one sheet is about a 2 to 250 word bio written in third person. And this is your opportunity to communicate to the host who you are, what you do, who you serve, and most importantly for your podcast bio, it's what gives you the credibility to talk about what you talk about. Because there's a lot of people that can say oh, I read a book about marketing and now I want to be interviewed on your podcast and talk about what I learned. But if you actually have experience and a track record of results and you've worked with many, many clients and you've helped people, create real results, you want to have that in your bio so you can communicate to the podcast host why you're a good guest for their show. So I'm going to give you an example of what this actually sounds like. So here's an example of, 2 sentences of my bio. Jessica Rhodes, founder of Interview Connections, helps entrepreneurs amplify their authority by leveraging podcast guesting. So right there, it's who I am, my company, and what I help, who I help, and what I help them do. So that could be the first sentence, who you are, what's kind of your position, what are you in your company, who do you help, and how do you help them? All right, that's sentence one. with over 30,000 interviews booked, authority, communicates that I've got experience. She knows how to transform conversations into revenue generating activities, opportunities. So that's an example of the first two sentences of a podcast one sheet bio that right away, anyone who reads the first two sentences or hears it is like, oh, this girl knows what she's talking about. So you want to write your bio in a way that when someone reads it or they hear it, they're like, okay, I trust this person. They clearly have experience and I want to learn what they know. All right. The next thing on your one sheet is going to be your interview topics and your interview questions. So your topics and questions are what you provide to the host to, number one, make it easy for them to say yes. So for example, if I pitch a podcast host, I'm going to just choose someone in the chat here. If I pitch Elizabeth to a podcast host and I say, Elizabeth is a great guest for your show. She's amazing. This is what she's done. This is her website. This is her company. Would you like to have her on the show? If I don't include a one sheet, the host is going to say, so you're expecting me to do all the work to write the topics and the questions and to research Elizabeth. You don't want to give the host work. If you are giving, write this down. If you're giving the host more work, they're going to say, no, we all have enough work. I got enough work. Don't give me any more work. Make the host job easy. If you make it easy for the host to say yes, you're going to make it easy to get booked on the show. So your topics and questions should clearly show the host the value that you have to give them. And it should show that you understand who their target audience is. So for example, some of the topics on my one sheet are about how coaches and consultants can generate more dream clients from podcast guesting. When my team at Interview Connections pitches me to a show that is for coaches and it's about how to grow your business, a host is going to look at that and say, oh, this is perfect for my audience because I have an audience of coaches. I help them grow their business. This is a specific tactic that will help my audience. So make it easy for podcast hosts to connect the dots between who you are, what you do, who you serve, and their show, their audience, and what the purpose of their podcast is. So give me a yes in the chat if you're tracking. You're like, yeah, I get it, Jess. I get that the topics and the questions need to be valuable. Let me know in the chat. Okay, perfect. So you want to, a couple tips, do's and don'ts. Avoid questions that are all about you and your service. The podcast interview is not an infomercial. It is not a sales pitch. So if you currently have topics on your one sheet that are about your service, about the value of your program, about why your service is better than your competitors, delete them, scratch them off, erase them. That is not what podcast hosts want to hear you talk about. They want to know value. You want to be teaching, serving, providing value. So these are not self-serving questions. The topics should tease the value that you can bring to the audience. So a question that you have on your one sheet should kind of suggest what the answer will be. And it should have the host say, ooh, I want to know the answer to that question. My audience would want to know the answer to that question. And I'm seeing some questions in the chat. Do you have an example? Yes, we will provide an example. We have an example of the one sheet in our free Facebook group, Guest Expert Profit Lab. So we'll drop a link to that in the chat. Interviewconnections.com/group. If you want to go in there, we've got it pinned to the top of the group. And then you want your questions to be specific so you stand out as a unique and interesting guest. So who here, I know we have some, healers and coaches and consultants. So if you have a specific methodology or a modality or something unique, like you created it, that could be one of your topics and questions because it makes you stand out as somebody that is unique. All right. So now in your workbook, your homework for today, and we still have a little bit more, so don't jump off yet, but this is going to be your homework. Write down 3 interview topics. So get your workbook out. You're going to write down 3 topics that you could be interviewed on, and I want you to email it to us. Douglas and I and Rose and Vernie, who you may have emailed with, we want to read your topics and see what you can be interviewed about. This is a huge step in you actually implementing this strategy. I want to see what your topics are. So you're going to write 3 topics you could be interviewed on and email them to us, support@interviewconnections.com. Any email you've gotten from us about the masterclass will have come from support. So you can feel free to just respond to any email if you're like, wait, what is it? So send us your topics. We want to see what you want to be interviewed as a guest on. All right. Next, podcast guesting equipment. So raise your hand or just drop an emoji in the chat, a microphone emoji, if you already have a great setup, a microphone setup. So you do, as a guest, you need to have a microphone. And make sure that when you are showing up as a guest on podcast, you are contributing not only value, but good sound quality. So you need to have good sound quality when you're a guest on a podcast. So you definitely want to be showing up with a microphone. Now you want to have a microphone, you want to have headphones or AirPods, something that makes it so there's no echo. Good lighting. So I have some nice lighting on my desk to make it so you can see me bright and clear. And then you want to have a quiet space, a quiet room. So if you have an office, shut your door. If you work from home, make sure people know not to interrupt you. My family knows I've got French doors on my office here. So they know if I'm talking and there's the light on, they don't come in. So make sure that your family and your coworkers know not to interrupt you so that you can record in a quiet space. I'm telling you, when you show up to podcast appearances with a microphone, with headphones, with good light, the hosts are going to be like, thank God. Making my editor's job easy. So you want to make sure that you have good sound. Yes, Anne says sound dampening draperies and wall panels. Yeah, I have carpet in my room, but if you don't have carpet or rug, like definitely want to make sure you're not echoing. And one of our bonus gifts for all new clients who enroll in our program by January 21st, you're going to get a podcast guest essentials bundle. So I'm going to put together a whole essentials bundle so you have everything you need: microphone, headphones, lighting, a microphone stand. So book your consultation call. If you're thinking about working with us, I saw a question in the chat. The consult call is free. It is for anyone we believe we can help with podcast guesting. So book a call to learn what it would look like. That would be a one-on-one call with myself or Douglas, and we'll just talk a little bit more about your business, see if it would be a good fit for us to work together. Douglas, are you ready for the microphone draw of session 1?
I am so ready. I can hardly contain it right now.
Amazing. Okay, Douglas, do you want to come on camera and like walk us through and make the announcement?
Give me 1 second while
Everyone say hi to Douglas and say thank you, Douglas, for getting us all of the links.
All right,
Amazing.
all right. I don't know if anyone's a drummer back there, but let's get that going.
A real Christmas vacation moment.
Yeah, I haven't worked on it. Okay, I'm spinning the wheel now.
Right. Oh, I love
Big
the drum
money,
emojis.
big money, no whammies. We have Rusty Walker. Rusty
Walker, where's Rusty at? Woo! Congratulations, Rusty. We will be reaching out to you. Say hello in the chat, and everyone congratulate Rusty Walker for being the winner. We will reach out to you to get your mailing address, and I will send that out to you. Last masterclass, the microphone arrived the same day. So you're going to have your microphone. Congratulations. I'm super, super excited for you. So well done. Thank you for being here. So again, your homework for session 1 is to write down 3 topics you can be interviewed about on podcasts and email a copy of your topics to support@interviewconnections.com. And actually, as a bonus, just to like get a head start on you actually getting booked on podcasts, post your topics on social media. Like go to LinkedIn, go to Instagram, say, hey guys, I'm available to be interviewed on podcasts this year. Here's what I can be interviewed about. Send me a DM if you want me to be on your podcast. Tag me in those posts so I can reshare them. Jessica Rhodes or at Interview Connections, LinkedIn, Jessica Rhodes, Interview Connections. Go post on social media. Start getting yourself booked now. There's no time like the present. Email us your topics, post about them, tag us in those posts so we can reshare them. And I want you to start feeling and seeing the results of podcast guesting today. So do your homework. I'm going to just see if we have any questions. Email support@interviewconnections.com. Yes, this is a lapel microphone. I got this on Amazon, so I hope it sounds amazing. Email your homework to support@interviewconnections.com. And there's a lot of other questions in the chat. Send us an email. I'm going to make sure you get all of your questions. You can email support@interviewconnections.com if you have questions that you didn't quite get answered. And then make sure you're back here for a session 2, where now we have laid the foundation. You've got your goals. You've got your target market. You've got your one sheet. You've got, what types of shows are going to be the right fit. Tomorrow is all about strategies for monetizing. So specifically, how to actually activate the audience, generate leads, generate sales, collaborate with the podcast host. So Tuesday, 1 p.m. Eastern time, be back here at the same Zoom link. And then again, Wednesday, Thursday, we've got 3 more sessions after today. Cannot wait to see you there tomorrow. Thank you all so much for being here. Yes, replays will be sent out. We'll be emailing, text them. I'm going to get them up on YouTube like as soon as possible and send them all out. Thank you so much for being here, and I will talk to you tomorrow.